There's no more interest.
There are rumors about cryptocurrency. Have you heard of FedCoin?
Yeah.
Are they calling it FedCoin or what are they calling it?
I don't think they're calling it. I think the cynics do, but
USBC, I think, United States Bank Coin, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what the official term is. Just like QE, the Fed never called those programs QE. That was like just what Wall Street dubbed them.
If when we inflate our currency, when we pump out new dollars and stuff like that through quantitative easing, right? So how does that work?
Okay, so the Federal Reserve just buys assets electronically, and then in the act of doing that, so if the Fed wants to buy $1 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities, it writes a check. Then that check by law clears.
Manifests.
Right, because the bank, like Citibank, the seller of the bonds deposits the check from the Fed, and then Citibank says to the Fed, we got a check from you for $1 billion to this client. And the Fed says, yep, that's good. So the Fed just adds $1 billion to the electronic balance of Citibank, and then Citibank adds $1 billion to the deposit of that client. So just magically,
money is fake.
The money supply went up by $1 billion.
And so when inflation comes natural from that, I have to imagine, China and other countries are like, hey, yo, what the hell? Because we have debt and you're devaluing the debt we have with you. So they get pissed off about that.
Yeah, it's China and other, big holders. They're in this weird position where I think they want to diversify out of it, but yet if they just say to the world, we don't trust the dollar anymore, then it could crash it. And so it's it's sort of like if Bill Gates wanted to sell Microsoft stock, he'd have to, go through a divorce or just divest himself because of, charitable concerns. So there was a lot of people say that's why he did it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a time when, in order to expand the money supply, they had to find more gold. When they were making gold coins and silver, they were like, if you don't have the materials to make it, you can't make it.
Right. So I'm sure everybody is vaguely aware of the gold standard and how, Nixon ended. But actually, to me, the really cool period was with the constitutional founding, the late 1780s up through right before the Civil War. The U.S. federal government did not issue paper dollars. What they did is they said, if you want dollars, you have to bring in a certain amount of raw gold or silver, and we will stamp them at U.S. mints into coins that say $20 or $1 if it's silver. Yeah. And so the public, in a sense, determined the quantity of dollars in existence based on those legal rates. They announced the ratios, of course.
It's basically like the government was certifying this was the true and correct weight.
Exactly, right. So the money was gold and silver, and that's how Mises and other economists of the time thought of it. Like they thought money and gold and silver were the actual money. And you're right, the government all it was
doesn't
doing
the Constitution
was
say that?
Right. So that's the thing too. Like it gave the government the authority to coin money. It didn't mean to print up fiat dollars. It meant it was the same way it could set weights and measures. So it could say 12 inches is a foot. Just to allow commerce to flourish by having standard units. This is what we mean by a dollar. It's this many grains of gold.
So the Fed right now can simply say, "Hey, Ian, you got $1 billion," and that's it. Here's $1 billion.
Yes, but they wouldn't just give it to them. They would buy something for it because they're not dumb.
Right.
They're going to get $1 billion.
But they could give it to me though if I was a friend of a friend or something.
They could buy the crystal ball from you and say it's $1 million or $1 billion and buy it and acquire it, and that's the way they could funnel it to you. Yes.
What about my work? A nice jolly hello is I'm now giving them some advice, and they can give me $1 billion for that.
So economically, there would be nothing stopping. I think there might be statutes about they couldn't just pay you for a service.
We would think that.
We talked about this on one show where I was buying I was buying something from a bank. I had to do a wire transfer from one bank to another, and then so I bought a truck. We bought a truck for our mobile production studio, and then one day I get a call from this bank, and I'm like, they have no business to call me because I settled that debt. Mm-hmm. But then eventually I decided to check my messages, and they're like, we're calling about an outstanding debt you have. So what happened was, Bank A transfers money. I said, here's all the information that was provided for me, and it was all true and correct. They say, okay, the wire transfer has been initiated. It should clear soon. The other bank that was supposed to receive it said, we never got it. We have never received that wire. So then I'm like, okay. So I called my bank, and they're like, no, we have it right here written down. The money's gone. And I'm like, then where's the money? And they're like, it's gone. It just literally doesn't exist. So how does it?
In the South Park episode?
No, I mean, this literally happened to me a few months ago. If the banking system is literally just one bank writing down a number and saying you have it, and the other bank writing down a number saying you don't have it, and if one bank fails to write down a number, then the money is just gone. Eventually, I contacted somebody, and they told me, they ignored me. And then I tweeted about it, and that's the magic word in today's, you know, fascistic social dystopia, where if you have enough followers, you can tweet your problems away.
Right.
I'm fortunate enough to have been able to been like, "Hey bank, what's going on? Where's my money?" And then immediately I get like a liaison, like, "We're so sorry, Mr. Poole. We'll resolve this for you." And then they eventually said, "Okay, we figured it out, and don't worry about it." But the crazy thing is, for a regular person, if you have two banks and one bank says, "We went into your bank and hit delete on that amount," it's gone. Mm-hmm. You can't do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, and there is, in a very legitimate, or not legitimate, that makes it sound like it's okay, in a very real sense, that like a bank, when it grants a mortgage to somebody, there is a sense in which, you know, M1 is the term, like that's the measure of the money supply that literally went up, like the way economists measure how many dollars are in existence. And so the commercial banking system can expand and contract the money supply through lending or mistakes, like in your case.
Yeah, when they do loans, that money comes from nowhere, right?
Right. So, I mean, there's constraints. They can't just create $1 trillion. Like, there's things that would happen.
Right.
The reserves will get drained. But yes, strictly speaking, there's nothing in the accounting. Like, when a bank makes a loan, it's qualitatively different from, like, if the bar or something just gives you a drink and puts it on your tab. Like, there's a sense in which they're creating more dollars.
Basically, you know, Ian says he wants to buy, you know, my bottle of water. Mm-hmm. Or you know, this bottle of water. And so I say, okay, I'll give you a loan to purchase it. I, as the bank, then just type in to the owner's account, you have $1. And then Ian owes me $1, but I never actually transferred $1 to anybody, right?
Oh, yeah. So maybe the way to think about it is, because remember we were talking about you couldn't like use a treasury bond to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
You can go and buy, you know, you can use a $20 bill, like Federal Reserve note, right? That's money. But you can also, if the bill's $20, you can take out your bank debit card and swipe it. And technically what's happening is, you know, Bank of America, let's say, is saying, oh, right now Tim Poole has whatever, $1,000 in his checking account. He swiped that. So now we'll say he only has $980, and we'll credit you, you know, Kroger or whatever the grocery store is around here, an extra $20 in your checking account. Yeah. And so you're right.
But that's a checking account.
Right. But I'm saying that no, they didn't need to do anything. Like, it's just on their computer. What I mean is, if you use, so what I've been told is that when you use a credit card, right,
there's no actual transfer of funds. The credit card swipe literally just gives $20 to the other person's account, and then nothing is subtracted from anywhere.
Oh, okay, so right. So where I was going with it is to say, so you can see the grocery store does consider what Bank of America says as people, like how much money we owe you. If you showed up and wanted to empty your checking account, we would give it to you, and people treat that as good as Federal Reserve notes.
Right.
So that's different from just, you know, you giving him that bottle of water and him saying, I owe you whatever, $10 or whatever.
Like when a loan is given to somebody, that money is created.
Right. And the reason there's a distinction with what the commercial banks do is because for various reasons, the merchants in the community treat, you know, IOUs from the banks as being interchangeable or fungible with Federal Reserve notes, whereas most other
let's put
credits
it this way.
They don't.
Let's say a bank. So it's what they can lend out like 9 times or 90% of their existing cash reserve.
Well, that used to be the Fed got rid of the reserve requirements. So that particular thing is now. It's
when did they do that?
They did. When did it was like in April. It was right after the coronavirus thing hit.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And they this is funny. They announced it on a Sunday night, and in the press release, you had to go read the follow-up. Like, it just said, we've made some other changes, and you had to go read the follow-up press release to see that they got rid of reserve requirements in 2020.
So does that mean they can just literally create money at any point for any reason?
Okay, so that's what I was saying before. So there's no statutory legal constraint on what they can lend, but there is a mechanism. So if they lend out too much money, you know, like people want to buy homes and they lend out $1 trillion for people to go buy homes, people go and write checks in that.
I want to make sure we're getting this clear. This is what I'm trying to get at.
Right.
I don't understand. The bank isn't giving you money. The loan manifests the money upon signature. Like, the money is created out of thin air for the loan's purpose.
Right.
Okay. So, like, basically, the bank doesn't actually go to its coffers, take $1 out of its piggy bank and hand it to you. They just write it on a piece of paper. They just poof, $1's there.
Right.
And
they credit your account with, you want to go buy a car, it's $20,000 and you apply for a loan.
So that expands the money supply by $20,000.
Right. But I don't want your listeners to take what I'm saying too far. There are constraints, because if they're too reckless, any one bank, if it expands too much, when there's clearinghouse transactions with other banks. So the car dealership that now you deposit that check for $20,000 that was created out of thin air electronically, that dealerships, if they have a different bank, when they go to settle up with your bank, they're not just going to say, oh, Bank of America is good for it. They're going to say, send us Federal Reserve notes, or they're going to actually say, with your account with the Fed and our account with the Fed, settle up with us. So there is a constraint ultimately that it's called having reserves. So the commercial banks can't create Federal Reserve notes, and they can't compel the Fed to credit their own checking account with the Fed. So the Fed can do whatever it wants because there's no one above the Fed. The Fed just, if it creates money, period. The commercial banks, there is a sense in which by making a loan they do it, but if they do it too aggressively, the chickens come home to roost.
Is this intentionally confusing?
Yes, and I'm sitting here trying to decide how much detail to get into or not, because I don't want to say something that, taken out of context, sounds like I'm saying something wrong. But yes, there is a sense in which they can create money. Commercial banks do have limits. The Fed has no limit. The only limit, the only limit on the Fed is just if price inflation gets too high.
These local banks literally be like, I'm going to create a $100 bill for you, Ian, so you can buy that, expensive champagne.
Yes, there's nothing stopping them from except if they do that too much.
So that's money they create. When Ian pays them back, where does that money go?
So if they don't relend the funds out, that money gets destroyed. And so that's the sense in which the commercial banks expand and contract credit. And that's why Mises, that was his theory of the business cycle, incidentally, that the commercial banking system, they push down interest rates, expand credit, causes a boom. They chicken out for some reason. They raise interest rates, contract credit. The supply of money in a very real sense decreases, and that causes a crash. That
removal of the reserve requirements sounds like the U.S. dollar is worthless and on the verge of imploding.
So I'm surprised more people didn't notice it and make a big deal out of it. And it's part of the reason they didn't is because since the 2008 financial crisis with all the rounds of QE, as you may know, the banks were just sitting on excess reserves. Like they had money pumped in by the Fed, and then they didn't lend out, like you said, like the 10 times multiple they normally could have. And so when the Fed got rid of those reserve requirements, it didn't change any of the legal obligations. In other words, the banks already were well above what the requirements were. So getting rid of the reserves didn't constrain them. But you're right. So some other countries don't have reserve requirements too. So it's not like this is the one country where that's the case.
Yeah, but it is the petrodollar country.
Yeah, but it is. You're right. I was alarmed by it. And like I said, the way the Fed...
I'm buying more Bitcoin.
They did it on a Sunday night, and it was under the radar. And so the announcement...
They also removed the limits on savings accounts, converting them into checking accounts, basically. Is that what happened?
Right. Yep.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, you could explain it. I'm not going to...
So they made a change where I believe before it was, if you had it was technically a savings account, you could only move money from that into your checking account 6 times per month, and they got rid of that rule so that there's really in practice now no distinction between checking and savings accounts. Like
basically savings were like considered not in the money supply because you have a limit, 6 transactions per month from savings to checking, and it was supposed to be that savings, higher interest, and you put it in savings. Then they said no more, which means all of a sudden the money supply exploded, and everyone's looking. You've seen the M1 money stock just skyrocket. And everyone's like, you got to understand, Tim. It was funny. They were like, you're misunderstanding this. It's not an explosion in the money supply. They just changed the way they describe checking and savings. And I'm like, yo, they just said to extract your savings like it's your checking. That is an explosion in the money supply, and it's extremely bad news for this country. To flat out say, hey, everybody, your savings, start spending it like it's all you got. It's basically them saying like, oh, yeah, we're imploding.
And you can take like $1 million in your checking account and at the end of the month, move it into savings, get the interest, and then move it back?
Well, if you did do that, you'd only get it for the brief time you had it in there. You know what I mean? But that's right. So let me just give you my take on that. So just for the people listening, so M1 is one measure that includes checking accounts but not savings accounts. M2 included savings accounts. And so you're right. If you look at graphs, it's going along. And then in 2020, all of a sudden, M1 goes through the roof. And so people were alarmed. And then you're right. The apologists for the Fed was like, oh, you right-wing nut jobs or whatever. You're always freaking out. It's just a redefinition. But even if you use the old definition, M1 still went up a lot. Because you know what I mean? So
it's still at a speeding up like crazy.
And because M2, which the definition change didn't affect, also spikes. And so I think partly, Tim, maybe the reason they did that was to have an excuse so people wouldn't be panicked by the spike. You know, I can't prove that obviously, but it was convenient that people were like, oh no, when it was like half the spike was because the money supply by any definition really did skyrocket.
We got it pulled up, and you can see like in around March of 2020, the straight spike just goes straight up from April to, the month of April is a straight line up. And they're like, the rules were changed in how we described things. But if you look after that, April 2020 until now, the difference between before the spike and after, before the spike, it's like this. After the spike, it's like that. I mean, you guys can see it. You don't need me to use my hand, but it's like it's slowly going up. Major spike, and then it's skyrocketing after the rule change.
And are you looking at M1?
Yeah.
If you pull up M2, I don't know if you're Fred or what you're looking at, but M2 is not affected by the definition change. And so you can see M2 also spiked in April 2020 to show this isn't just a definition change. They really did pump in a bunch of money.
It's not as pronounced in M2, but you can see there is a spike, and you can see that from then till now, it is increasing. The money supply is increasing faster than it was beforehand.
Right. So there's the one shift, like you're saying, and the rate of increase.
I didn't know about that fraction, that reserve restriction removal.
It was right all in the same time period where they started doing that.
If I had known that, I would have bought way more Bitcoin.
And also like the Fed started buying stocks. Like they did a lot of stuff because everyone's freaking out about coronavirus, and so the Fed got
no one's paying attention.
Right.
Wow. Well, I'm not going to give anyone financial advice, but I keep we've been expanding the business. And my attitude is like hire people, expand our facilities, get more equipment. And people are like, don't you want to, like, there are questions about how fast we should be trying to expand and what we should be trying to build. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to sit around on this stuff when inflation's as high as it is. We're like, we had Max Kaiser on the show, and he said real inflation is probably closer to 14%. Do you have any opinions on the inflation rate in that capacity?
I mean, this is anecdotal, but when I go to the grocery store now, and I'm not talking Whole Foods, I mean just like Walmart and whatever, I can't get out of there without spending $200. I'm not even buying meat.
Dude,
it's
so bad. We went to the grocery store the other day, and we filled up our cart, and the final bill was like 30% higher than it was a few months ago. And I was just like, whoa. And I'm like, I'm looking at the receipt, like, what happened? But anyway. And
also they're doing tricks too with like the packaging. Like you're not getting as much Cheerios in your box as you used to.
Oh, they're getting smaller.
And the cardboard is thinner, if you've noticed that. Like they're doing all sorts of things.
Right now, I'm just saying like the last thing I want to be holding on to is US dollars. So I bought, some crypto. We're just making sure that we're not sitting on the money and we're expanding the business. It's like, I don't want just money sitting in the bank. Now, we're going to make sure we have the right cameras, the right microphones. We're looking we just hired someone, we hired another person today to help us expand and produce more content and make things go faster. There's a period in my life where I'm like, I was always very much just save. Now it's like, get off dollars, invest it in something else.
We got to be careful about hiring because we're going to need to pay them more eventually, because the inflation isn't gonna cap like the land that you get or the cameras. That's good, but people next year are going to need to be paid 20 or 30%.
And will need to be paid more to cover their costs too. Right. So I'm saying, like, instead of just holding on to, I don't know if this is did Mines make a public announcement recently? I don't want to say anything. It's not public.
I don't know to be honest.
Okay, then
Bill would know.
Yeah. So, but there's a lot of companies that are announcing they're getting off fiat.
Oh yeah. 25% is now. They went 25% of their
balance sheet.
Balance sheet is now in crypto.
Wow.
I think you're going to see way more of that. And, they're like, China's banning crypto. I'm like, shut up. They ban crypto every other month.
They started a cryptocurrency and then banned all the other ones.
Yep.
Nice.
The U.S. has got its plans for its, coin or whatever. I don't know. I don't think, all of these ultra millionaires and billionaires who have bought into Bitcoin are planning on losing it. Right. Especially overnight. So whenever these stories come out, it's always the poor people who sell off their cryptocurrencies. I'm not giving any advice. You do whatever you want to do. I'm just saying the last thing I want to be sitting on is fiat currency. We want to hold things that will be good investments and hedge against we're in a death spiral as far as I can tell.
Hey, just to clarify, did China actually, they started a central cryptocurrency? I read that, but I didn't. Yeah, I didn't go deeply into fact checking it.
I didn't go deep into it. I saw it.
Someone was like, "That's why they made it illegal."
I don't know, man.
What is legal?
What does that even mean anymore? Without giving advice, this to anybody. Just what are your personal opinions on the state of the U.S. dollar?
Sure. So I should admit this, that I was very worried after the financial crisis in 2008, and so I was going around in my role like affiliated with the Mises Institute and just in general as an economist, and I was warning people about the stuff we were talking about, like how the banks create fractional reserve and so forth, and I thought we were going to see higher consumer price inflation earlier. And so I even, I had a public wager with another comment, and I lost that. And guys Paul Krugman were running victory laps, making fun of me. And so if you mentioned Wikipedia, my Wikipedia entry is like, I was born, I lost that price inflation bet, and then maybe now I'll be on Tim Pool's show. And that'll be the three things that they mentioned in my life. But I'm going to say, well, I think the rest of the world investors were just misanticipated. You know what I mean? Like I do think the dollar is going to crash in our lifetime for sure. I think it's going to be a lot sooner than that. Just because every time a crisis hits now, their solution is they throw trillions of new dollars at it. And so unless they stop doing that, I think it's, and like I said, we've seen it now with our own eyes. Like it was kind of weird. And, guys like me were, people were calling us Chicken Littles and whatnot. And so I sort of was mute about it for a while because it didn't come when I thought it was going to. But at this point, clearly prices are rising rapidly around the country.
If beginning of last year, you bought steel, chlorine, cars, computer chips, cryptocurrency, you'd be set for life. I mean, if you bought Bitcoin last year, like beginning of last year, you said, I'm going to put all my money in it, right now, you would never have to work again. Like the amount that it's gone up since then is absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm. Have you studied debt recall at all? Like the history of it over the millennia? I think the ancient Greece had a debt recall.
Do you mean like where they just reset everything? Is that what you're saying? I mean, I haven't studied it.
In the Bible, yeah.
Where they're like, bring us all of your dinars,
like
and then
Jubilee, like every 50 years Jubilee in the Bible and stuff. Yeah.
Like, is that what? I mean, inevitably, I'm looking at this like it just is like I'm staring at a big pink elephant, and it is that this fiat system is going to crash.
Right. So to me, I think that's partly tied in with this whole Great Reset and everything. Like, I think the people running this system know that they're kind of pushing it to the limit, and that's why they're trying to get ahead of it. And this is going to happen, and then they have things in the wings that they're going to bring in to replace the dollar. Is what I think ultimately is going to come down.
Like they'll use BlackRock and then seize all of BlackRock's assets, and then they'll have all the land, and then they'll start renting it out to people for cheap or just for their slave labor or something.
I mean, I don't know about those particular details, but yes, I think they do want to move to a society where there's a few multi-trillion at that point dollar companies in league with powerful states, and they kind of own all the real estate and whatnot, and everybody else is like a serf, like we said, and so they're and they probably won't use U.S. dollars at that point.
Yeah, you'll get a little book, you'll get an app, and the app will be like, "Did you get your loaf of bread this week?" And you'll go to the store and you'll scan your phone.
By the way, to me, another thing I see is like they're trying to get everyone off cash. Yep. And I mean, just little things like when I go to the ATM now, the options it gives me for withdrawal, it only goes up to $200. I can still type in a different screen to get more, but 20 years ago it offered $300. Right now, we just said like that could go in one visit to the grocery store. So you would think it would let you take out $700 right now as just a default option, but it doesn't. So I think they're trying to wean people off of holding cash and get everyone just swiping cards because they can control that.
I think that special interests, politicians, nonprofits want the labor shortage. Mm-hmm. It's forcing kiosks and self-checkout. So there's a big conversation about, how do we, if we've got the potential for kiosk ordering at fast food restaurants,
right,
how do we transition people out of these jobs? They're going to get mad when they lose their jobs. Nobody wants Luddite riots, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens is, hey, look, we got this opportunity. There's people are freaking out. Let's now just start switching all of these things over to self-checkout, to self-service, to kiosks,
right,
and then no one's going to complain about losing their job because we're giving them unemployment benefits.
Right, and they're also that's the push for UBI and everything that they're yeah, you're right. I think they're trying to get the public used to the idea that every month you just get a check from the government, and then you're happy, right? And then you sit at home and you communicate through your screens, and then we regulate that flow of information.
They'll be more miserable than they've ever been when that happens. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.